If you're in your 20s right now and you feel like you're behind, like somehow you messed everything up, like everyone your age is moving forward while you're still trying to figure where to even start, I want you to take a deep breath because you're not the only one, you're not alone. And what you're feeling is probably the most common experience of our generation, even though nobody says it out loud. And every time you open your phone, you see people younger than you making money, traveling, buying houses, and driving cars that cost more than your entire net worth. And slowly it convinces you that you're not successful by 25. You have already wasted the decade. It makes you think you're too late. It makes you think something is wrong with you. But the real problem isn't you. The real problem is the expectation you've been comparing yourself to. Somewhere along the way, we started treating our 20s like they're supposed to be the highlight of our entire lives. Like we're supposed to have the dream body, the dream income, the dream relationship, the dream social life all at once before we even fully understand who we are. And when you inevitably can't keep up with that checklist, you assume that you're failing. But the part that nobody tells you is that your 20s were never meant to be the arrived decade. There is a decade where you're supposed to, get lost, experiment, mess things up, feel confused, break patterns, and build the foundation for everything that comes next. And I had to learn that the hard way because I spent a big chunk of my early 20s jumping from one business model to another business model. I tried dropshipping, SMMA, sneaker reselling, affiliate marketing, Amazon FBA, you name it, I've tried it. And every time something didn't work, I turned it into evidence that I was the problem. Every time a year passed and I still wasn't where I wanted to be, the voice in my head got louder and it was saying, like, you're wasting your 20s. You're running out of time. Everyone else is ahead of you. But looking back now, none of that time was wasted. Every failed attempt was part of the training phase that I didn't know I was in. I didn't realize that I wasn't behind. I was just learning. I was collecting skills that only made sense in hindsight. And that's really why I'm making this video. I want to break this belief that you need your life perfectly figured out by 25, that being broke at 26 means you're done, and that one wrong turn ruins everything. Because none of that is true, none of that is real. Your 20s are not about having it all together. They're about becoming the person who will thrive later in your life, in your 30s and your 40s, and for the rest of your life. Big reason why people feel like they're failing in their 20s is because they're measuring their life against a completely distorted version of progress. Social media doesn't show you normal people in their 20s. It shows you outliers. People who either got lucky early or maybe started years before you even started, or had advantages that you didn't. But because you just see the end result, your brain starts telling you that everyone is moving faster than you and you are the only one that's stuck. And the truth is that most people your age are just as uncertain as you are. They're just not posting it. And on top of that, your 20s are the first time when you experience both freedom and pressure at the exact same time. You're old enough to make your own decision, but young enough to feel that like one wrong move could, mess everything up. And nobody really prepares you for that because you're expected to know your passion, your long-term career, and how to become financially independent, all at once, but nobody teaches you this stuff. When you don't have it all figured out, you start questioning yourself, but you don't question the expectation, which you should do. You label normal confusion as just failure, when in reality, this is the part of life where, it's supposed to feel messy. It's supposed to feel confusing. You're not supposed to exactly know what you want to do. It's normal. Some people do know what they want to do, but not everyone, and that's normal. As long as you try, as long as you do something. What makes this even harder is that nobody teaches you the difference between being behind and simply being at the beginning. The first few years of anything are slow and uncertain, like in business, in life, anything. And that's not failure, that's just the starting phase. But because we live in a culture where, that's obsessed with speed and instant results. Normal progress gets mislabeled as, falling behind. And you might see a friend, land a high paying job or, making millions at 20 years old, and you automatically assume that, they're ahead in life and you're just stuck. But what you don't see is that your path might be different and it might compound later in ways that, you never expected. And I think the real problem in your 20s is not actually being broke. It's that people panic about money, about not having the right job or, the right income. But being broke at the beginning of your life is completely normal. And you're just starting out, you're still figuring out your earning potential, and you're still figuring out what you want to do and what you're good at. So the real danger is not being broke, but it's getting stuck. It's locking yourself into a version of yourself that stops growing without realizing it. And most people don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they quietly settle. They take a job they don't like for now, thinking it's gonna be temporary, but they never leave. They repeat the same weekends with the same people doing the same things, and they fall into the habits that feel harmless, drinking in the weekend, scrolling away for hours, always needing distractions. And those habits slowly harden into your identity. And at some point, the last 3 years of your life look identical and you have made no progress. And this is the real danger. This is actually the real danger of your 20s. Repeating the same last 6 months over and over and calling it a life. When your days stop challenging you, your sense of possibility shrinks and your dreams start, feeling unrealistic, not because they are, but because you're no longer doing anything that stretches who you are. Comfort becomes the default and anything uncertain feels too risky. And the scary part is that it has nothing to do with intelligence or potential. It's just what happens when you live on autopilot. When you don't consciously decide what your life is going to be about, the easiest option decides for you. Your 20s are the decade where each small decision compounds massively, and a little growth each month turns into a completely different life by 30, but a little stagnation every month does the same effect, but in the opposite direction. So if you feel lost or broke or behind, that doesn't mean you're failing. The real problem only starts when you stop moving, when you stop doing things. I think most people fail their 20s not because they don't have the potential, but because they misinterpret the decade. They chase the appearance of having it all together instead of actually becoming, someone stronger, clearer and more capable. And they're so scared of picking the wrong path that they take no path at all. And nothing will stagnate your life faster than, waiting for perfect certainty. Once you accept that your 20s are about building and not proving, the pressure changes and you stop asking, why am I not there yet? And you start asking, what am I learning right now? Because you don't need to impress anyone. You just need to be collecting the building blocks for the life that you actually want. While you're in this building phase, there are a few traps that can quietly steal your entire decade, and if you're not careful. And the first one is letting people who don't have the life that you want decide who you are and what to do with yours. And it's usually not random strangers, it's usually the people closest to you, like family, friends. And that doesn't mean they don't care about you, they care about you, but their view of what's safe and responsible comes from a different world. And if someone spent their 20s playing it safe, that's what they'll encourage you to do. And if someone never took risks, or your ambition will make them feel uncomfortable because it reminds them of the chances they never took. And you can feel when this happens, like when you share a goal with someone and you're excited and you're happy, and you want to share with someone, but instead of support you only hear you only get fear and warnings. Like you hear things like be realistic, or don't risk too much, or just get something stable. And if you're building your confidence, that kind of advice can kill your potential. And the hard truth is that people can only lead you to the life they chose for themselves, not the life you want. So you have to start filtering advice. If you wouldn't trade places with someone, and not just financially, but how they think and how they live, then their opinion shouldn't be shaping the way you live. And that doesn't mean that you need to start cutting people off. I mean, sometimes you have to, but that doesn't mean you have to start stop talking to your family or anything. You just have to protect your vision. Don't share your goals to anyone, and be selective with who you share your goals with, and be selective with who you listen to, who you take advice from. Another trap is letting distractions quietly become your default way of living, like going out, watching shows and scrolling, gaming. And there is nothing wrong with these activities. The problem starts when they stop being, just something that you do when you enjoy, but they start becoming your routine. Like you do this every single day. And distractions are only harmless when you already have direction. But when you don't, they become your direction. And if you don't have something you're actively working toward, there's nothing for those habits to interfere with, so they feel normal. And that's how just having fun turns into years of no real progress. So you don't need to cut all distractions from your life, but what you need is something meaningful enough. You need to have a purpose, something meaningful enough that you don't want to distract yourself for all the time. Like when you have a goal and when you working towards something, your choices start to naturally shift, in that direction. And you still have fun, you still have a couple distractions, but you're gonna spend most of your time focusing on your goal. So, how do you actually make your 20s count without obsessing over being ahead? Comes down to a few simple shifts. The first one is starting before you feel ready. The most important shifts you can make in your 20s is to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start doing things before you know exactly what you're doing. And you'll never think your way into clarity. Clarity comes from actions, attempts and feedbacks. And the earlier you start trying things, the earlier you start collecting information about what works for you. And most of the skills and opportunities that will define your future will only show up after you begin. That's why your first jobs or your first businesses, whatever, won't succeed probably because their job is just to build resilience and to build your skills and to actually teach you something. It's not to be successful. The second shift you can make is to set goals that actually test you, that actually stretch you. You need at least one goal that makes makes your current situation feel a little bit uncomfortable. Not a goal that sounds good to other people, but a goal that actually matters to you. And strong goals change your behavior without you forcing it. When you genuinely care about something, you'll naturally start choosing growth over distraction more often. You don't need a list of 20 goals. You just need one serious goal per year, and that's enough to move your life in a completely different direction if you commit to it. And the third shift you can make is focusing on leverage instead of the appearance of progress. Because your 20s are not about looking successful, they're about, quietly building skills and assets that compound, like communication, writing, sales, marketing, storytelling, tech, system, whatever. If you're into this business model, that's all the skills that you want to learn. These things don't always look glamorous from the outside, but they give you options later that most people don't have. And when you build leverage, your effort starts working with you instead of dying the second you stop. And that's what separates most people who keep growing from people who peak early. There's one thing you really need to understand before your 30s, is that nothing meaningful happens on a perfect timeline. Your 20s are not the verdict of your life, and they're a phase of development, and a lot of your biggest progress in this decade will be invisible. And you won't always see the payoff immediately, but the way you think, the way you handle problems, and the way you see yourself, that's really what you're building. Your 20s are the most forgiving decades you'll ever have. Like, you can fail and recover, you can pivot, you can change your mind, you can rebuild. And the biggest mistake isn't failing, it's wasting that flexibility on fear. You don't need to have the perfect job or the perfect relationship or the perfect bank account by 30. You just need to be moving. And if you're learning, trying, adjusting, then you're not behind. So if there's a message that you can take from this video, let it be this one. You're not defined by the way you are right now, but you're defined by direction you're moving. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to refuse to stay the same when you know you're capable of more. You haven't missed your chance. You're not late. You're not behind. You're just earlier in your story than you think. For this video, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.